As we come to the end of Tanzania's story, I don't want you to leave with only the echoes of names and dates. I want you to carry certain truths, pieces of history and faith that matter beyond this land itself. These are not just details of treaties or rulers, not just accounts of trade routes or plantations. They are lessons written in blood and endurance, in betrayal and survival. What you're about to hear may not be the last reflections of this journey. However, they are the kind of truths you hold close, because they remind you of how oppression moves, how faith is misused, how survival endures, and how Allah still governs the rise and fall of every empire. Tanzania's story cannot be told without remembering that Allah is the one who governs history. Every trade wind that filled a sail, every caravan that set out into the interior, every treaty signed under pressure, none of it escaped his decree. Men thought they were building empires, but in truth, they were only walking the path Allah had already written. The Omani rulers who came to Zanzibar carried with them ships, soldiers, and ambition. They saw themselves as masters, lighter-skinned, tied to Arabic, tied to Islam, and they used those differences as proof of superiority. But Allah had already warned us in His book, "O mankind, we created you from a single male and female, and made you into nations and tribes, so that you may know one another. Verily, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the one most God-conscious." 49:13. Yet in their greed, they forgot. They twisted faith into justification, turning Allah's deen, a deen meant to free the oppressed, into a cover for enslavement. Some African chiefs and townsmen, seeing the power and wealth of these merchants, believed the distortion and handed over their own people. Oppression in that moment did not only arrive from the outside, it was absorbed from within. And this is what makes the story of Tanzania so heavy. Families marched from the heart of the continent to Bagamoyo, children carrying ivory until their small bodies gave out, mothers torn from their homes, fathers left behind. The land still remembers. Bagamoyo, lay down your heart, is not just a name, but a wound. And yet, even in chains, many prayed. Even when stripped of freedom, they carried Islam in their hearts and stories on their tongues. Survival itself became an act of worship. As the century turned, the system of slavery in Tanzania did not collapse all at once, and it unraveled in pieces, pulled by foreign pressure, greed, and Allah's unseen decree. Britain entered the Indian Ocean declaring itself an enemy of the trade, yet every treaty it signed told a different story. In 1822, the Moresby Treaty was struck with Sayyid ibn Sultan. On paper, it banned the selling of enslaved Africans to Christian nations, but it left the doors wide open to Arabia, Persia, and other Muslim lands. Britain gained the right to stop and search ships, and cloaking itself in moral language while tightening control of the seas. It was not abolition, it was strategy. By 1839, the Hamilton Treaty pushed the ban further, forbidding sales to more regions. Yet loopholes remained, and the internal trade across East Africa continued to thrive. Britain painted itself as a protector, but in truth, it was using Zanzibar as a stage for its own power. Finally, in 1873, under the pressure of British warships in Zanzibar's harbor, Sultan Bargash signed the Frere Treaty. The great slave market in Stone Town was declared closed, and trading under Zanzibar's flag was outlawed. On the surface, this was a victory. But in practice, the trade lingered in shadows and inland markets for decades. And so we see, nations maneuver, rulers bend, treaties are signed and broken, but Allah alone decides the end of every system. The Quran tells us, "Do not think Allah unaware of what the wrongdoers do. He only delays them to a day when eyes will stare in horror." 1442. What men thought they had hidden in markets and loopholes, Allah had already written to expose. The wound of Tanzania deepens when we set its figures side by side. Men like Juan Garrido and Juan Valiente, who had once been chained, carried their trauma into foreign wars. Their contradictions were born of survival. They fought under banners not their own because chains had bent their choices. Their story is heavy, but we can trace it back to captivity. Sayyid ibn Sultan's story is different. He was born free, born Muslim, born with Quran in reach and privilege in his hands. He could have walked a path of justice, yet he turned faith into currency and people into property. His betrayal cuts sharper than the conqueror's sword because he knew the truth and still chose oppression. And when his children and grandchildren inherited the land, they inherited his hunger, seeking to own not only plantations, but the very soil Africans had lived on for centuries. This is why Tanzania's past stings. It was not only the foreigner who enslaved, but the neighbor, the co-believer, the one who prayed while chaining others. Oppression came dressed in the language of Islam, even as it violated its spirit. But Allah never abandoned the oppressed. Families walked for months, carrying ivory and sorrows toward Bagamoyo, some collapsing on the road. Many never reached the ocean. And still, the name of Allah was whispered in chains. Still, prayers rose from broken backs. Bagamoyo, lay down your heart, became both a graveyard of suffering and a testament of survival. Because what endures is not the empire of Said, nor the treaties of Britain, nor the caravans of Mirambo's enemies. What endures is that Tanzanian languages still live. What endures is that Islam, carried in whispers, still guides. What endures is the human soul refusing to vanish when the world tries to erase it. And so we leave this chapter with a truth. Allah governs history. No empire stands forever. No betrayal is hidden. No pain is wasted. The Quran reminds us, indeed, we honored the children of Adam, 1770. That honor cannot be stolen by ships or markets. It is written by the one who sees all. So as we close this chapter, carry with you not just the pain, but the survival. Carry with you the remembrance that Allah is always present, in the storm and in the silence, in the treaty and in the tear. What He writes cannot be erased.